who is a barrister of Lincoln's Inn and a partner at Cornelius, Lane and Mufti, one of the most prestigious law firms in Pakistan. He graduated from HSN in 2002, leaving an incredible legacy here at our alma mater. Being the first HSonian in history to be awarded both the academics and the sports blazers, he was the recipient of the Jubilee Medal as well as winning the HSN Challenge Cup. Secondly, we have Madam Toshiba Server, who is an experienced entrepreneur as well as being a business executive and advisor to a number of emerging and well-established businesses across Pakistan. She is a phenomenal teacher with 20 years of teaching experience behind her. Promoting book reading culture across the country, she has also organized numerous literary festivals in different cities in Pakistan. Last, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Sadiq Sufi, who is one of the most decorated individuals who have studied at HSN College. He served as the head boy of the batch of 2020 and is now a member of the Harvard class of 2025. Winner of the Rawaz Medal, he was the recipient of both the academics and co-curricular blazers, as well as being an integral part of the college football team. Having won both the Altaf Hussain Hali Challenge Cup and the Malik Chirag Khan Challenge Cup in the same year, Sadiq Sufi is perhaps one of the most prolific speakers the college has ever seen. We also have Azhar Said, who will be serving as the tabulator for the day. It is our honor to have all of you here with us today.
Education in a time of crisis. As quarantine changed social interactions forever, and the role of media in developing current politics is an evidence of the power of fake news. And for the rules of procedure for today's event, speeches should be between 3 to 5 minutes. Paper reading is not allowed in any form, including flashcards. The decision of the judges will be final and not open to appeal or reversal. The speakers will be judged on content, delivery, and pronunciation. Speakers will be penalized for exceeding the time limit. And the speakers must refrain from using any foul or inappropriate language in their speeches and must not use any sexually explicit terms. Speakers may choose to speak either for or against the topic. And with your permission, I'll be starting with Rahim Muqtas Khan of C2E.
I will be speaking on the role of media in developing current politics as an evidence of fake news. May I start? We look into this world through a lens that lets us see everything with clarity, that shows us the reality of our society. But in today's generation, this very lens has been blurred out, has been obscured due to the increasing influence of mass and social media, due to the increase of lies and naiveness flowing in our bloodstreams on a daily basis. But who is to blame? Is it us and our naiveness? Or is it them and their lies? Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in the 21st century. A century of modernism, a century of liberalism, a century where mass media has reached its limits. And the question arises, why? Why are we allowing our media enforce their opinions on us? Why are we blindly trusting every single word our media says? It is because of the fact that in these past decades, media has influenced our lives gravely, to an extent where we cannot get past a day without reading a newspaper article or watching the daily breaking news headlines. And this daily routine has brainwashed us. It has brainwashed us into believing every single word our media says without even a shadow of a doubt. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is highly problematic. Because our media is not only exploiting the right to speech and the right to expressions, they're instigating political and economic crises, they're hindering in governmental proceedings, they're creating misconceptions so large that the country has to shut down to do protests and rallies. And we are doing nothing. We are doing nothing to identify where we stand together right now. We have failed to identify to where, have failed to put our trust in the right sources. We can see the influence of media over our heads when an Indian media agency is broadcasting the news of a raging civil war between the Pakistani armed forces and the Sindh civil police force, where it was expected that the Pakistani would oppose and point out these very Indian agencies. We rioted. We protested against the very protectors of our community, the very protectors of our country, the Pakistani army. And that is the biggest example of what media holds over our heads. Ladies and gentlemen, where it is an established fact that free media and journalism help establish the very essence of democracy, help establish a country where the voices of people are heard, we need to understand that we're living in an era of internet and technology, and where traditional media at this moment is working towards an era where false media is not being promoted through editing out information on the grounds of anti-democratic, on the grounds of false or exaggerated. Our political systems are yet to face another hurdle which is brought forward through social media. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand as a society that media will not stop broadcasting false news. We need to understand as individuals, as it is in our hands. It is in our hands to identify at who should we put our trust in, to align our boundaries, because in the end, we have the right to freedom as well. I hope I have cleared some lenses by the end of this speech, and all of us look into this world and see the reality of our media. Thank you.
Music of class C2E.
My name is Suhaib and I will be speaking on the topic when attempting to create a more harmonious and caring society. Gender is a more important factor. Do I have your permission to start? Ladies and gentlemen, we clap with both our hands. But let's say, on the request of one hand, you decide to tie the other one up, silence it, and hide it somewhere where your eyes can't see, somewhere where your vision can't reach. Well, you can snap all you want, but the thing is that the clap will never be heard again, and the sound will never be as productive or as harmonious as ever before. You see, when a young girl in the south of Punjab dreams of going to a big city to become an artist, this hand shatters her dreams by calling her a disgrace to the family. When a teenage girl in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa shows a desire of gaining higher education, this hand beats her and marries her off to an unknown lustful person 3 times her own age. When a Khwaja Sirah in any part of the country tries to become independent and tries to get a job, this hand laughs at them and tells them to go to a roundabout. And when a woman in sin speaks up after being raped, she is killed by this very hand in the name of honor. What harmony and care are we talking about, ladies and gentlemen? We have never leveled the playing field in terms of gender. How can we expect to prosper? I know that class and income are grave problems for Pakistan, but we can only start talking about them when we have solved the issue of gender equality. What good is a wealthy country when it is of patriarchal nature? What good will it do to decrease the class gap when many women will still be forced to work in their own kitchens as if they were maids? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is why gender equality is the most important factor right now. equality of not only rights, but also of opportunity. You see, even with these limited opportunities, the people of the other gender still shine. Fatma Jinnah, Muniba Mazari, Malala Yousafzai, Julie, all of these names have defined progress for Pakistan. Yet what have we done for them? From throwing acid on their faces to physical abuse, from rapes to forced marriages, from paying them less for the same jobs to mental torture, from treating them as mere objects to killing them in the name of honor, we have done everything to crush the section of people that has shown the most progress for Pakistan. How do you expect to see harmony? These names that I mentioned, along with countless others, have pushed past the barriers to rise above the rest. But can you imagine how much higher they could have gone if it were not for these barriers that we have placed in their paths? Can you imagine how many more Muniba Mazaris, how many more Arfa Karim Randhawas could we have produced? No. Because we haven't provided them equal opportunity. So I think it is time. It is time to give them the platforms and opportunities that they truly deserve. It is time to bring gender equality into this country. And the truth is that the real change will never come unless every single one of us decides to change. I know that one mere firefly cannot make much of a difference in the darkness of the night. I know that one person might seem quite powerless considering the task that awaits us, considering the challenge that is coming towards us. I know that one person cannot turn this horrific night into a dawn alone, but we cannot stay silent and let the night continue to flourish as it is. We have to do something about it. And ladies and gentlemen, believe me, if many fireflies come together, then the dawn that we are waiting for is not far away. That day is not far away when many Muniba Mazaris, many Malala Yousafzais, many Arfa Karim Randhawas will help Pakistan become prosperous and harmonious. That day is not far away when someone's voice will be heard before they end up on a wheelchair. That day is not far away when girls will be able to go to school without being scared of getting shot in their heads. And that day is not far away when Pakistan will be able to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Abu Zaid. For our third speaker today, we have Khudadad Usman Birk of C2L.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khudadad Usman Birk and I will be talking on the topic when attempting to create a more harmonious and caring society in Pakistan, gender is a more important factor. May I start?
Yes, please.
24th October 2020. Woman is killed by her husband due to a rift over her job. Daily Dawn. 7th October 2020. Pakistan's adult female literacy rate of 47% is just above Afghanistan among the 8 South Asian countries. 24th September 2020. More than 50% of girls and women in Pakistan are anemic. The news. Ladies and gentlemen, what do these pieces of news imply? Evident, clear and obvious that females in our country are not getting their due rights. Pakistan is a victim of massive gender discrimination against the females in employment, education and health. Just to mention a few, Mr. President, honorable judges and my fellow speakers. When attempting to create a more harmonious and caring society in Pakistan, gender is a much more important factor than class or income. Havelock Ellis has very aptly identified that when God created woman, he took the rotundity of the moon, the slenderness of the reed, the blossom of flowers, the glance of a deer, compounded these together and created a woman. Alas, a big number of this delicate, soft and elegant gender is being treated inhumanly in Pakistan by dominant males through various means such as domestic violence, vanni, savara, karo kari, honor killing, acid throwing and forced marriages. Mr. President, the World Bank data shows that the proportion of females in our population is 48.5%, but their labor force participation is only 22.1%, a rate which surely does not commensurate with the percentage of females in our population. Have we ever thought that what is the cost of this female discrimination to our society and our economy, rather than empowering them to participate in the socio-economic progress and prosperity of Pakistan? We are keeping them away and inflicting barbarities and cruelties upon them. Honorable judges, balance has been maintained. Indeed, balance has been maintained by the nature in all the things of the world in order to make them look exquisite and beautiful. And we have been destroying this balance by treating our women in an undignified and disrespectful manner. I must say that this gender discrimination is definitely a non-traditional security threat for our nation, where half of the population does not feel safe, cannot flourish, and does not enjoy many basic rights. Can we create a caring and a harmonious society under these conditions? Are we to establish a progressive and a peaceful Pakistan under this sorry state of affairs? The answer is a big no. I repeat, a big no. But Mr. President, classes and income disparities even exist in the most advanced countries of the world, but what has been rooted out of these countries is unjust and unfair treatment of the females. Socially, they are treated equally with utmost reverence. Economically, they stand together with their male counterparts and play the pivotal role of advancing their nations. They feel secure and their minds are at peace. They get their due rights and are not treated as objects. Ladies and gentlemen, in our country, all those mistreatments need to be treated with an iron hand by the state. And as so wisely said by Susan Lee Langeau, that a day will come when man will recognize a woman as his peer. That day, we will create a peaceful society, ladies and gentlemen. We will. Because on that day, there will be a perfect comradeship and an ideal union between the different sexes of the society, so that can produce the development of this nation. And as so wisely said by Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, there are two powers in the world. One is of a sword, and the other of a pen. And they have great competition and rivalry between each other. But now there is a third power that is stronger than the both, than that of a woman, Thank you.
Thank you, Maulana. Moving on, we have Zain Tawqir of H2J.
Assalamu alaikum. May I begin? You and I are all here as a result of two things: the dream of a poet and the work of a lawyer. Two men born in oppression who fought to give the children of the subcontinent the peace and harmony that they never knew, so that we could prosper, excel, and become something great. That harmony, ladies and gentlemen, was the oasis of freedom our nation was supposed to be, but harmony seldom lasts. For today we are posed with a question, that if we are to return to their dream nation, must we focus more on the shackles binding our women or the neglect upon the destitute? Through our leaders, we built boundaries to protect us from the British and Hindu monsters that lurked outside, craving Muslim blood. But soon we realized that within us were monsters of our own, men corrupted by greed, trading humanity for power and walking over the helpless who then run to the courts of justice. But to where can they run when our courts are unjust? In our nation, molded from freedom, two groups are oppressed the most, and the first victims, ironically, is held dear at heart by every victimizer. Our women, overwhelmed, overlooked, overruled. Only catching our attention when it is time to ask, is dinner ready? But when it is time to champion equal wages, to abolish child marriages, or to bring to justice domestic abusers and rapists, the nation falls silent. After all, how dare our daughters speak up and compromise the honor of our family? In the words of author Letty Pogrebin, when men are oppressed, it is tragedy. But when women are oppressed, it is tradition. From the second their cries echo through the hospital room, misfortune, not celebration, seem to have befallen the family. Yes, the status of Pakistani women is low. But what of those with no status at all? What of those that surround us in invisibility? What of the 24% of Pakistan that lives below the poverty line, that lives in mud, fields of scraps, works till deaths, without help and without pay? They live in a hell that is chipped away to fashion the heavens of the rich. And charity, how could we think to donate 1,200 rupees when we live blinded, swooning over the new $1,200 iPhone? Neglect is all they know until they break their bones and go beg on the streets. Until we level our financially fragmented society with the cements of unity and equal opportunity, Pakistan will run like a car with a flat tire. Going, yes, but at what speed? I ask you, to what end? The other 76% is born fortunate, and the steers of our country are within their hands, our hands. Take from the rich, give to the poor, or neglect them, discard them as we have always done, so that the only peace they will ever know will be the touch of the angel of death. When Jinnah achieved his dream, this dream, he said to the first Pakistanis that we are all citizens and equal citizens of one state. But today, when the poor clench their stomachs, dying of hunger, and when little girls weep the night before being married off to a 40-year-old, Pakistan has failed them and become the very nightmare from which our fathers fled 74 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Zain. Next, we have Sayyid Amin Mustafa of class H1F.
May I begin?
Please.
57, 58, 59, 60. The clock strikes 8. A small family in New Delhi, India, turns on their television to the news of the Pakistan Armed Forces declaring martial law in Karachi. What they see on their screens are acts of civil war. A Republican mayor on Twitter reads a fake tweet of Donald Trump inciting his supporters to attack the US Capitol building. Now, Mr. President, these two news cycles consisted of fake news. But my fellow speakers, what was the impact of it? Those children sitting in New Delhi, India, have been brainwashed. Their generation, and the next, will think the same. That Republican mayor who took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States now attacks the biggest symbol of liberty within America. And the sad reality is that, Mr. President, you, honorable judges, you, and gentlemen, you, all fall into this trap of fake news. The role of media in developing current politics is an evidence of the power of fake news.
But my fellow speaker, fake news didn't just start in the 21st century. It was fake news in the 1700s during the Jacobite Rebellion, when King George II was reported dead. It was fake news in 1803 when the Mayor of London announced peace deal with the French, just in order for the London Stock Exchange to soar. It was fake news in 1914 during the First World War, when the German media reported that the President of France had been assassinated. It was fake news in 2019, when ABC falsely aired footage of Turkish forces attacking Kurdish civilians in northern Syria. But the question which arises is this, ladies and gentlemen. If fake news has existed for centuries, why is it more powerful today? And number one, the accessibility to media nowadays, the transfer from newspapers to radio shows and now social media. And secondly, the way that these very news cycles are politically and strategically planned. And to quote Mark Twain, if you do not read a newspaper, you are uninformed. But if you do read a newspaper, you are misinformed. When an institution meant to be the guardian of public interest, when an institution meant to be a political watchdog becomes a mouthpiece for politicians, becomes a mouthpiece for the corporate establishment, it no longer remains impartial, ladies and gentlemen. What it becomes is institutional propaganda, and what it becomes is selective journalism. And our counter-argument to this may be that fake news isn't strategically planned, and that is the result of unverified and unregulated media, and that is an honest mistake. To those people, I challenge you. Go home, turn on your TV, and if within 2 minutes of broadcast coverage, if you cannot align a particular news channel with a certain narrative, then my argument is null and void. Let me do that for you. You turn on Airline News. Where does it go? Speaks for itself. You switch to Geo News. Speaks for itself. You turn towards the international media, you turn on CNN. Loud and clear. You switch to Fox News. Fox News. Loud and clear. And it is only then that we realize the extent of fake news. When authoritarian regimes in Russia use it as an excuse to persecute political opponents. It is only then when we realize it when countries like India use it for warmongering. It is only then when we see ex-presidents using it to overturn a general election. And the saddest reality is that the media is equally involved. And to conclude my speech, I would like to recite a portion of a poem that these very journalists love to recite affairs and affairs. But I will say it in a way which fits them perfectly. Speak! Speak, for this little time is plenty. Speak, for the death of morals and values has begun. Speak, for the truth is no longer spoken. Say whatever must be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Up next, we have Mohammed Saad Altaf of Class H1F.
Assalamualaikum. May I begin?
In the archives of history, one finds innumerable instances where the victor only stood victorious due to the manipulation of knowledge they had prior to an event. May that be the defeat of Rome at Cannae or victory at the Battle of Virginia. May that be the Allied stand at Somme or the Normandy landings at D-Day. All this was made plausible due to the influence of data available to the general public, and the tool used for that persuasion was media. Ladies and gentlemen, long before the age of electronics, media was a network of spies. Since the Industrial Revolution, it became the press, and afterwards, in the late 1940s, it evolved into the television, and so on. Each entity, swerving for dominance in this world, tries to manage the information that reaches its sphere of influence. It develops a web of lies to further feed the masses through media, and hence results in media being evident in developing global politics, which is an irrefutable evidence of the power of fake news. Ladies and gentlemen, look around you. The invisible web of media spun around fake news has curbed the voice of the truth, to a point now that its very own credibility is being questioned by the very masses it was designed to mislead. Cognizant journalists have left the mainstream media and have started reporting and criticizing at the internet. YouTube news channels are now a norm that have dented the demented thinking of the higher-ups that masses can be mindlessly herded into a particular direction. Fake news took the United States by storm 4 years ago and devastated the trust the American people had in their time and tested system of elections. Channels like Fox and CNN have lost their credibility, while channels like BBC are hanging by the skin of their teeth. This turn of events tells us that although media was the key kingmaker in the realm of politics, and fake news were the most potent weapon in its arsenal, yet the world is morphing into such a diverse group that unipolar thoughts and singular alignments can now be coined as a mechanism of the medieval times. Mr. President, let me warn you. States that have tried to carve a unipolar political atmosphere have almost always been driven by a media that spread lies, took dictation, and played on propaganda. Neither have such states lasted long, nor have their futures been bright. Such states include examples of Hitler's Germany, Lenin's Russia, Mussolini's Italy, and Milosevic's Yugoslavia. The media of these states favored the dictators, with kings' parties and rigged elections, and what became of them can now be witnessed by all. So heed my word. Realize how devastating it can be for a state when its media spreads fake news favoring a special someone. Mr. President, I live in the land of the pure, and I strive for purity, for that is who I am, and I want this purity to extend to the fourth pillar of the state, that is media. I want this purity to extend till the eradication of impurity and fake news, so that in the future, no fake news crashes the stock markets. No fake news crumbles my country onto the playlist. No live show host distributes certificates of treason, and no hero is turned into a traitor. Ladies and gentlemen, open your eyes to the stark realities of our age. The web of fake news is all around you, but so are the means of cutting through it. I urge you to see through the lies they feed you through this media, and instead of laughing it off, look for an alternative. Look for a change, an alteration that may modify the lives of the youth for the better. If your core is honest and resolute undeterred, there is no reason why the world would not be a better place to live in. I thank you for your audience.
Thank you, Saad. For our seventh speaker today, we have Miangul Saad Sikandar of class H1G.
May I begin? Sure. Whoever controls the media controls the mind. Fake news has emerged as a new menace, one whose purveyors proclaim themselves to be agents of journalism. Yet they taint this noble profession. Today, we live in a society in which spurious realities are manufactured by the media, by the governments, by public corporations, by religious groups, and by political groups. So I ask, what is real? Because we are unceasingly bombarded with pseudo-realities manufactured by very sophisticated people using very sophisticated electronic mechanisms. It is not their motives that should be distrusted, but their power. It is an astonishing power, capable of creating universes of the mind. After all, the media can distort reality into illusion, and illusion into reality. The internet has created channels of communication that play a key role in circulating news. And the media does not only possess the power to change the message, but the entire dynamics of conflict in politics. Therefore, the increasing use of social media in global conflicts, extreme politics, and election processes, diplomacy around the world has become less private and more open and more susceptible to public opinion and perception. Taking advantage of our human nature, leaders have found that elections are won when narratives connect with people's hearts rather than just their brains. Reality becomes inconvenient and far less enticing when the alternative proposed is a reflection of what people want to hear rather than what they need to hear. News, in its non-journalistic avatar, is a loose robe billowing around an event, part poetry, part prose, some amount of reality housed in a fair amount of theatricality. In most cases, what happens in the external world does not really matter to us. So why don't we just construct a version that suits us better? For example, what is happening in Xinjiang does not affect our everyday lives in the slightest. So why don't we just construct a version of it that will make us feel better about ourselves? Let us take the issue of Kashmir into example. Two different stories are presented by two different governments, whether it may be the illegal occupation of land or the violation of human rights, or the subjugation of the domestic people to battle terrorism. The distinction between truth and lies become blurred. After all, news, the very idea of news as an objective fact, was a journalistic invention. In an information-scarce and loosely connected world, it was a necessary one, but an invention nevertheless. The problem with fake news is that increasingly for far too many of us, it is not actually considered that big of a deal. It is not considered a problem. As consumers at the center of the universe, what matters to us most of all is that we are satisfied. If this fact doesn't do it for us, surely another one will. Therefore, for every lover of liberty, for every well-wisher of its prosperity, there will exist an antagonist who will argue that the existence of fake news is either excusable, justifiable, or necessary. Because the human brain has not evolved to perceive reality. It has evolved to create an illusion of reality. That is why an exciting lie gains more attention than a boring truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Miyagul. Moving forward, we have Ale Rashid of class H1I.
Assalamualaikum. I'll be speaking on the topic when attempting to create a harmonious society in Pakistan, gender is a more important factor than class or income. May I begin?
Please.
Ali and Ibrahim sit at home. Ali in his twin-size bed with a PlayStation remote in his hand, whereas Ibrahim, on supposedly the lesser side of town, sits on a charpai holding a 6-year-old cricket bat. They both hear their fathers walk in. Ali's father clad in an Armani suit, whereas Ibrahim's father clad in sweat after a day of labor. Their mothers come forward presenting trays of food, ever the devoted wife, but no, today father has had a bad day. Ali's father fires a string of insults at his mother for she had committed the sin of not ironing his shirt properly in the morning. Ibrahim's father smashes a plate at his mother's feet for she had the audacity to present him with food that had a little too much salt. Their incomes are different, the societal notions of class are different, but Ali and Ibrahim still want to be like their fathers, still want to be like the breadwinners of the family, not the nagging females at home. And so continues the cycle of inferior female stature in Pakistani society. In 1973, Pakistan adopted its current and longest running constitution, where it ambitiously set out what it called fundamental human rights. Article 25 of that constitution said that there shall be no discrimination on the basis of gender. Unfortunately, Mr. President, all those words represent are ink stains on paper. Our governments have been quick to bring agricultural reform, industrial revolution, anything to bridge the per capita income. But who would tell them they were ignoring 50% of said per capita? Who would tell them that while they spent millions training skilled labor, they were self-trained teachers, self-trained cooks, and self-trained tailors at home? Because that is where society put them. Who would tell them there were millions of other females and girls with undiscovered potential locked into four walls? Because that is where society put them. But no, we turn towards income and class to reach peace and harmony. But I ask you, how can you expect to reach equality between classes in society as a whole, where domestic violence is trivialized and equality between two genders lost in our homes? How can you expect to bridge the income gaps when every working woman is wet with turning heads and a glass? No, I should say a cement ceiling. And how do we dare to look each other in the eye and call ourselves a peaceful nation when a woman can be brutally sexually assaulted in front of her children on a public road and our law enforcement has the audacity to blame this on the time and gender? And Mr. President, while this should be enough for my argument, I will not leave you with pure conjecture. I ask you to turn towards nations such as Norway, states such as Finland, countries such as New Zealand. We all hear about them for some reason or the other. Norway as the happiest country in the world, Finland with its lowest crime rate, and most recently New Zealand as the first country to reach 0 positive cases in the COVID-19 pandemic. What we forget, however, is that all 3 of these countries rank in the top 10 of the Gender Equality Index. 2 of these countries have young females as their head of government. We daydream about having lives like them. Let us take steps to be like them. Let us vow to empower. Vow to empower every working widow, every sister without a brother or father so that she can earn the income for her family. Vow to empower every mother in her home so that she can teach her children what equality between classes really is. I would take the liberty to paraphrase Napoleon Bonaparte while saying that let Pakistan have good mothers so that she can have good sons. We so proudly call ourselves the gentlemen of HC. Well then let us make a gentleman's promise to start a march towards peace and harmony, one which is not, as those before me have called, a procession of fathers and sons, but one where man and woman in Pakistan finally stand as equals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Next up, we have Mohammed Danyan Daud of FSC.
May I begin? I backed my car out of my garage and sped away for the Liaquat Park. My heart was pounding, blood gushing through my veins, trying to rupture the walls that won't handle my pains. As I reached, I sank, accommodating the sight of the deadliest horde of Resident Evil. Yes, Mr. President, they killed her. I knew their worth. I knew their worth. I knew their worth. This is how the world acts. This is how the male reacts. This is how the dominance enacts on the rise of women. The fear, the horror, the darkness swarmed its way into every corner. That night, Mr. President, that night of Liaquat Park felt so heavy on me, on you, on every one of us. Every night, sleep stayed me no sooner than my cheek met my pillow. The same sickening air whistling overhead kept me awakened whole night. Whoa, 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 Echesonians. It's because the first emerging woman was silenced. The Benazir Bhutto was silenced. Woman protagonist and revolutionist was silenced. It was death of a nation.
But why, Mr. President? Why? Why the men can't wink at the women going up high? Why they try to back off the woman rising up high? Why they think that the woman is weak? When you were born, who did you seek? Why they think that the woman is meek? When you both were built from same Madrid? This difference, Mr. President, stems at the prime level. At home, where a brother relishes parties and doesn't care about money, or daughter is asked to sit back because they don't have enough penny. Son-in-law is treated with respect, and daughter-in-law with utter disrespect. And daughter-in-law with utter disrespect. They want their son to prioritize his family, and they want their daughter-in-law to prioritize her husband's family. And then they talk about gender equality, my friends. And then they talk about gender equality. Mr. President, family is the elemental unit of our society. It is a knot that binds the threads of whole nation together. If it would lack harmony, then how would ever peace prevail in our society? If 50% of our population is unemployed and cannot even support their fellow working men, then how would ever peace prevail in our society? If half our population has no contribution to academics, to business, to economic infrastructure, then I'll ask you again, Mr. President, how would ever peace prevail in our society? I cannot imagine living in such a misogynistic and unnatural world, but this was the world in which so many women lived in for far too long. Mr. President, the countries where peace really prevailed, the US, UK, Canada, France, Australia, were the ones who worked on the world of justice and gender equality, the fundamental principles to upgrade the quality. They asked their women to work as hard as men each day and gave them the right to earn the real pay. So today, Mr. President, we collapsed, they triumphed. We tumbled, they cleft. We fell, they rode. We leveled, they soared. Hence, the topic, Mr. President, when attempting to create a more harmonious and caring society in Pakistan, gender is a more important factor than class or income. Wait, without confronting men's sense of entitlement, I don't think we'll ever understand why so many men resist gender equality. So let's find out if we are in this or not.
Thank you, Daniel. For our second last speaker today, we have Hassan Majid Altaf of class H1.
May I begin? It is the dawn of a new century. The date is the 3rd of January this year, 2000. The people of Assam have taken to the streets to celebrate what they believe is a new beginning, a new start. Yet the Indian media televises this gathering not as a celebration, but as a protest for Muslim and minority rights. Word reaches to the criminal mobs present in the vicinity of the gathering. They move towards the epicenter and go on a killing spree, at the end of which heads are placed on trays and sent back to the families of those who were brutally slain, who were innocent of any and every crime. A bloodbath then ensues between the two parties involved, at the end of which 50 more are lying on the ground, not moving, dead. Now they might have left for their eternal abode, but the ones they left behind in this cruel, cruel world, as we know, are still in the crossfires of a political and ethnic war. Mr. President, honorable judges, my fellow speakers, Let us turn back the clock by 5:25 clicks. The year is 1475. It is Easter Sunday in Trent, Italy. A 3-year-old child named Simone has gone missing. The Franciscan preachers, who were the news carriers at the time, point their fingers towards the Jewish community of murdering the toddler, draining his blood, filling their cups, and drinking to celebrate Passover. The bishop at the time, Johannes V, orders the law enforcers to go and arrest the Jewish community, in the process of which 15 more, later to be found innocent men, are put to the ground. The papacy, recognizing a bogus story, tries to intervene and inculcate peace, but, Mr. President, they fail, like they always do. More baseless stories spread, more violence spreads, and the foundational stones of what we now call anti-Semitism have been laid. And that dictated the political dynamic of the 12th century and still dictates the socio-ethnic spectrum in the Middle East and Far East of the world. Let us move forward now. Beware of false knowledge, because it is more harmful and dangerous than ignorance and arrogance, both. Well, Mr. President, if that is true, then why were bogus stories regarding the indictment of Miss Hillary Clinton on the rise? Why were false claims, why were myths of an Ohio state worker destroying the ballots for Mr. Donald Trump on the rise? If this is true, then Mr. President, I question, why were false news of Yemenis refugees moving towards states that they border, which ordered then the killing of these refugees? I question. Pope Francis and Robert McKee answered some of the questions I will pose to you today. Number one, why do we trust the media again and again? After the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, an investigative report was launched which sent shockwaves throughout the entire world. Why can't we hold them accountable? Why do we always turn to them? Why do we have to believe them? These questions were answered by Pope Francis when he wisely stated that let us all promote the journalism of peace. Let us all promote and invite any and everyone towards this journalism of peace and protection. Not one that propagates darkness, not one that propagates the hounds of injustice. Let us ponder and let us think together. Thank you.
Before we move forward, I would like to request everyone to welcome our esteemed principal, Mr. Michael. Thank you, Hassan. And our final speaker for today is Zaid Akhtar of Class H1B.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I will be speaking on the topic of the role of media in developing current politics is evidence of the power of fake news. I will be speaking for the motion. May I begin? A well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. These are the words of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. In today's world, the onus of maintaining a well-informed citizenry falls primarily on the press and the media. That's why Walter Lippmann, one of the most celebrated journalists of the 20th century, said, "There can be no higher law in journalism than to tell the truth." So, the media is expected to play the role of a neutral messenger. But what happens when the media starts becoming an active participant in politics? When news has somehow morphed into fake news? In 2016, when Donald Trump was elected President of the United States, Russian-sponsored fake news was targeted towards specific segments of the American population. On Facebook, it was seen by 126 million US voters. This industrial-scale deployment of fake news across mostly all social media platforms produced a historic shift, resulting in Donald Trump being elected as president. Ladies and gentlemen, think about that for a moment. The most powerful office in the entire world was held by a man who rode a wave of fake news into the White House. But fake news isn't just restricted to the US election. In 2017, the Burmese army launched a fake news campaign against the Muslim Rohingya minority. Warnings were spread about incoming jihad attacks. This fake news was the carefully planned prelude to a campaign of ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Muslim Rohingya minority, which resulted in 1 million Rohingya fleeing from their hometown to Bangladesh as refugees. And while Rohingya villages were systematically burnt down, while Rohingya women and children were ruthlessly exterminated, what were the rest of the Burmese doing? They were being fed a steady diet of fake news, which made them celebrate a genocide, which made them give free rein to the Burmese army. So yes, the impacts of fake news are not only devastating, they also spread far and wide. My opponents could have argued that the mass-scale deployment of fake news in the US and its terrible effects in Burma are just testimony to the power of all news, whether real or fake. However, a study conducted by MIT researchers in 2018 highlighted the actual insidious nature of fake news. In an analysis of millions of tweets, it was found that fake news travels deeper, more broadly, and is in fact more viral than true news. It was found that the top fake news posts regularly reached 100,000 people. The same number for true news? Just 1,000. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat this. False, fabricated political news reaches 100 times more people than real, factual news. 100 times. This is the world we live in today. The next question we must then address is, what is the role of the media within this plague of fake news? Is the media simply a neutral, perhaps unwitting messenger, which some bad actors guaranteed use to transmit fake news? However, the truth is far more disturbing and lies in the very nature of fake news. Strident headlines, startling revelations, and extreme views, which are the calling cards of fake news, are exactly what keep us engaged in a way that true news possibly cannot, as the MIT study has just shown us. So what does this mean? It means that these big social media corporations are highly incentivized to actively encourage fake news. It's why Twitter, Facebook, Instagram have been so slow and silent when it comes to making a move against fake news. It's why they stood silent when Donald Trump advised millions of people to drink bleach during a pandemic. It's why they stood silent when thousands of Muslims were killed in Burma. The business of fake news, the business which can literally lead to genocide and mass killings, this business is just way too good to refuse. Fake news was always, in the words of Shakespeare, a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. Ladies and gentlemen, the hell of fake news is upon us, and we ignore it at our own peril. Thank you.
With that, I would like to invite our worthy principal to present tokens to the respected judges. Firstly, I would like to invite Madam Toshiba Server to receive her token. Secondly, I would invite Mr. Usman Akram Sadi to the stage. And lastly, I would like to invite Sadiq Sufi to receive his token. I would like to invite Madam Toshiba to say a few words about today's competition.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, and before I say anything, I have to thank you, Samara, for giving me the opportunity to actually witness the thoughts, emotions, and suddenly the day has begun with a lot of optimism coming in from the youth who's going to define the new story for Pakistan. Believe it or not, I was overwhelmed to hear some of you. Though I've been introduced and I am an entrepreneur and I've been teaching entrepreneurship for the last 21 years. But as a part of me, which is an activist as well, owing to my experiences, I have to appreciate and highlight the commendable efforts of you being the teachers to guide these highly energized minds who are innovative, who are living in an evolving technological world, who have the emotions, who have the understanding, the comprehension, and who know the requirements to steer through. Yes, we've been talking about how the economic turnarounds will benefit all of us, not realizing how the values and the emotions will build a peaceful, harmonious and beautiful world, which can only then result in any economic turnaround. I have been attending a lot of events as one of the judges for the business plan competitions and likewise, but this experience of being part of today's event is actually giving me food for thought for initiating some of the movements specifically related to women empowerment, and I have been a torchbearer. Many people classify me as a feminist, and I actually take pride in that. So, thank you very much. You have been amazing speakers. It was so tough. I had been thinking, kya karu? Iske andar to koi hai nahi jisko I could give low marks, but everybody was reaching the peak or the highest score. I don't know what you gentlemen of Aitchison must be doing. I was wondering that, wish I could be sitting with you and cheating and figuring out how you were marking, which reminds me of my time of taking advantage of friends and associates or the peers. But boys, each one of you, irrespective of whatever positions you get, you are stars. And please take the zeal forward. Good luck to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Usman Akram Sadi to address the
Assalamualaikum. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure coming back always, and this was absolutely wonderful. I spoke with Sadiq just now as well. It was genuinely hard to judge. Most of you were very, very good, and I just give you a small anecdote. When I was there, I was in the boarding school. Generally speaking, boarding schools are considered to be very good at sports, very bad at academics, even poorer at speaking. So, and at our time, debate competitions used to be judged by referring the student's name and their houses. So whenever it was now next Usman Sahi Kele house, immediately the pronunciation would be 3. That would be the immediate marking of all teachers. But it's absolutely wonderful to hear all of you. It was very, the content was amazing. A little repetitive because you all went with the same topics, but otherwise it was very well researched, I thought at least. And the only problem is that you've convinced me on fake news now as well. So I'm not sure what was said about us was true or not. So, but otherwise it was wonderful to be here, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sahi. Now I'd like to call Mr. Sadiq Sufi on stage to say a few words.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think I've surprised most people with my facial hair more than anything else. I saw Madam Samara's expressions. First of all, I'd like to say that this is, by the way, now what happens when you don't let head boys keep beards for 5 years. I'm really humbled to be here. I was invited by Madam Samara, and I was really humbled when I got the invitation because I graduated just a year ago, and it seems a huge honor for me to be here with such distinguished judges. And I'll echo what the other two have said. I thought the quality of the debate and the speeches was remarkable today. I have witnessed Malik Chirag's for the last 5 years as part of the senior school fraternity, and I don't think I've seen the quality of debate that I've seen today in any of those 5 years. So good luck to all of you. It's really tough. I'd just like to say that a declamation is about striking the right balance between content and delivery. Because it's a pre-prepared speech, it's to some extent a theatrical performance as well. But at the same time, you can't go on rambling about nonsense. There has to be logic and rational arguments being made that are intellectually provocative. And I thought that balance too was struck remarkably well today. And on that note, I'd like to wish all of you all the best. And again, I'd like to thank the college for having me here and inviting me. It was a true pleasure to witness these speeches. Well done, thank you.
Thank you, Sadiq. Now the moment everyone here has been waiting for. After a very toughly contested competition, the judges have been able to come to a conclusion. The third position is shared by 2 boys, Abuzer Sohaib and Zain Toki. In second place, we have Ale Rashid. And the winner of the Malik Chirag Khan Challenge Cup of 2020 is Sayyid Amir Mustafa.
Okay.